Hello, all. Welcome to our summer chapel series. As most of you know, I am Dr. Joe Allotta. I am the campus chaplain. And been a busy summer. It's kind of, I feel like, and maybe you feel the same way, it takes twice as much work to get half as much done. But we're excited about getting the kind of next semester up and going and getting classes together. But it's been important to me to want to keep chapels going throughout the summer, kind of keep a little bit of a connection and be able to talk a little bit about what's going on. And obviously, there's a big, giant topic that we really just haven't had a chance to sit down and have a conversation about yet. And that is kind of race in America. And here at Trinity, we certainly have a very diverse student body. I'm thankful for that, but then it many times creates some of the same complications that we see in America today. And so what I wanted to do, instead of me talking and me sharing my thoughts, I wanted to reach out to some of our great chapel speakers that we have here at the college that we've invited in, some Black pastors that are great friends of mine, great friends of the college. And I just want to give them an opportunity to share. Instead of us just kind of going back and forth how I would normally do in a discussion forum, I am going to kind of just ask some questions, toss it to them, and get their point of view. And so these are men that I respect, are godly men. Over these next couple weeks, I'll share some different interviews. Today is going to be Pastor Darryl Williamson. And so we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation, but again, just letting him share his thoughts, his experiences, and hopefully it's something we can learn from. So I hope you can kind of sit through this. I know there might be things that you want to react to a little bit. But again, let's listen to everything he has to say. Let's listen to everything, and I think we can really gain some great wisdom. As Proverbs tells us, from listening to a whole conversation. Then hopefully we can maybe interact a little bit in the comments, and whether on YouTube or on our post on Facebook. But so thankful to be able to engage in this conversation a little bit. We'll do a little bit this week, a little bit more next week, and kind of see where it goes from here. And then, of course, going to continue this conversation on race and Christianity and the church in our country when we come back to have chapels a little bit more together. I don't know exactly how together our chapels are going to look in the fall, but at least a little bit more together than me talking to my computer camera. But let's begin. So I'm here this morning with the pastor of, and I always know there's a lot of Christian words together in your church, Living Faith Bible Fellowship. Do I got that right?
That's it, brother. You got it.
All right. Pastor Darryl Williamson is a great friend of the college. He comes to speak in chapel a couple times a year. We have a lot of graduates that go to his church. We have several students that take the travel down to Tampa. And Pastor Daryl, I'm so thankful to being here with us today, having a conversation on race and the church and kind of what we can do and what we need to be aware of. And I think my main goal is just what can me, as putting all my cards on the table, as a white person, that I can better understand the Black experience of one of my Black brothers and sisters in Christ.
That's good.
And so I'm not going to mince words. Let's get right into this. When I'm trying to go off of questions that I see, people in my circle on Facebook make comments and make statements, and I cringe a little bit, but I don't always know how to respond. And so I want to hear from you. So one of the things I see a lot of people posting is things like all lives matter. When you see somebody post that or hear somebody say all lives matter, what thought pops in your head when you hear people say something like that, which seems like an innocuous statement, but there's things behind that?
Yeah, that's a very helpful question, Joe. And first, I'm going to say I'm glad to be a part of the conversation. I'm glad that you see the importance of this conversation. So thank you for that. So I think the context of that all lives matter statement is important. And so if somebody says Black lives matter and you respond with all lives matter, it feels like a dismissal of someone saying, hey, Black lives matter. And what that statement really implies is two things. One is Black lives matter, too. And it also suggests that in our society that we've not always fully valued Black lives the way we had valued white lives. It doesn't mean that no one values Black lives. Is that we're saying that historically there's been this significant inequality in how we have upheld the value of a Black life and what it means to see Black pain or Black loss. And do we value that the same as white pain and white loss? And so if somebody says all lives matter in response to that, it feels corrective. It feels like, no, all lives matter. And Black Lives Matter never is not meant to suggest only Black lives matter. And it's, of course, it always surfaces in response to a loss of Black life, right? So it doesn't just come out of the blue like, hey, Black lives matter. No, in response to a Black person being killed and possibly and very often unjustly, is this reminder, hey, there are things going on in our society that's costing Black lives in ways and at levels higher than it's costing others, in particular white lives. And so the problem with the all lives matter statement then really is that it's seen as a way to dismiss or to not take seriously the problem that Black Lives Matter is intending to address.
Thank you for that. And just kind of as a follow-up to that, how does a person that maybe feels trepidation or even, let's say, dislike for the organization Black Lives Matter versus the concept of Black Lives Matter? I've seen people make statements and comments that, yeah, I don't agree with the Black Lives Matter movement, and they cite things that they find on their website and belief statements that are maybe very politically different or ideologically or economically different than they would like. And so they don't like the movement, but they're fine with the concept. How do you kind of walk those waters?
So I think that's a very helpful question. And I think it kind of fits in with your first question in some ways. And so let me tiptoe into a political space for a moment.
Please.
So I think a lot of people have said, and when they kind of justify their support for the current president, for Donald Trump, they say, I don't like this. I don't endorse maybe his personal morality, or I don't endorse when he says these kinds of things. I wish he wouldn't do that, but I embrace this thing. And so we all understand how to balance out our objections of things with our support of other things about the people or organizations that we are talking about. And so one reason why, say, Black and brown Christians don't have the same struggle is because they're not looking to partner with the Black Lives Matter organization or Black Lives Matter movement to address LGBTQ plus issues. And because that's not really what they're looking to address in that moment, but we're talking about Black lives, then they feel like, you know what, I can join the chorus saying this without equivocating. And so every time I hear someone that's like conservative, I'm not conservative or liberal, so I feel like I can talk like this. I don't have a dog in the fight. But I rarely hear a conservative provide a supportive statement for, like, say, the president's agenda, while at the same time equivocating. I support this, but they just say, I support this. And so I don't feel the need to constantly explain kind of what's wrong with Black Lives Matter, the organization. I feel like we can just talk about kind of the core concern. Now, let me say one other thing. Historically in this country, going back to the time of slavery, right in the heart of the abolitionist movement, going all the way through the civil rights movement, and even to today, all the attempts to improve the situation of Black people in this country, either to see them emancipated, to see them made whole after emancipation, to kind of respond to issues of lynching, convict leasing, all those kinds of things that were really kind of subjugating these people, going into Jim Crow, segregation, all the attempts by people, especially those who claim to know Jesus, to advocate for them were almost always met with accusations of liberalism, socialism, things like that. And so there's nothing distinctive or new about those who are concerned about Black Lives Matter. They had the same concerns about Martin Luther King. And so they accused Martin Luther King of being a socialist or a communist. One of my favorite figures from the civil rights movement is a woman by the name of Fannie Lou Hamer. She was a very simple, God-fearing woman from Mississippi. And so a reporter asked her once, he said, "Miss Hamer, people criticize what you're doing, saying that it's communist." And she said in her deep Southern drawl, she said, "You know, sir, I don't know anything about communism. I don't even know what it is. But everybody keeps accusing me of being a communist because of what I'm doing. Maybe I should be one." And so the point is that it really is not about the Black Lives Matter organization. It's that folks often look for a reason to raise a concern or a boogeyman, as opposed to let's focus in on the issue. Do we have a concern with how Black lives are being valued in society? And as Christians, since we are pro-life, how do we advocate for the dignity of all lives, including Black lives, brown lives, yellow lives, red lives, our Native brothers and sisters, and yes, white lives. And so I think if we lean into that and not try to explain it away and deflect it, we might make a lot more progress on it together.
Awesome. We can start transitioning towards maybe your experience as a pastor in a church and how you navigate some waters. Obviously, I don't want to paint too broad a brush of, well, this is how Black Americans view this and this is how white Americans view this. We're not monoliths.
That's right.
But we all have individual experiences. But I would say that I think a very common statement of many white Americans would be that, yes, there are bad cops and we need to get bad police officers off the force, but that we need to support them and that they're important and great, and we need more of them. I would say is probably a general. I think I can get a lot of percentage of white Americans to say something like that. That yes, there are bad police officers and we need to get rid of them, but man, what a great institution and we need them. Give me some insights maybe on how Black people, and again, it's not fair to ask you to speak for a few million people here in America, but maybe help me get some insights on maybe how Black people view police officers. And I'd love to hear your individual thoughts if you're willing. Yeah. And then how have you as a pastor, who I would assume by the size of your church maybe has police officers or family of police officers in your congregation, with people who, at least right now, tensions are heightened between many in the Black community and many Black lives and blue lives, to just kind of use the hashtags. How have you tried to bring peace in the midst of a congregation when maybe tensions are heightened? So I know I threw a lot out to you at that.
That's a lot of stuff there, brother. And I think it's all very helpful. And I think, Joe, I think that there are a lot of different layers to this. And so it's not, you talk about like how Black and white aren't monolithic, and the same thing is true with policing. And this whole issue is not really simple. It is a complex problem. The police serve us and serve our society as an institution very well. And I think that we all feel safer knowing that the police are available. Most of us at one time or another have called the police for help. And we are thankful. We are very much thankful for that. And I think all of us too, well, many of us have had both black, white, brown, have had bad experiences with the police. I think what's distinctive, I love the term, Joe, that you mentioned when we first started talking. You talked about the Black experience. What's distinctive and almost a universal in the Black experience is moments of being suspected. And so very few Black people have lived for any period of time and not been seen as suspicious. What is he doing? Why are they there? And so I have been stopped in my life by the police for doing nothing but walking down the street with my friends with police cars. And I was a student in Boston with police cars pulling up on us in Kenmore Square. And we were doing nothing but walking. And so, and we didn't stand out in any way other than we were Black. And they thought we met the profile of some folks. It didn't get out of control, but there were. It could have gotten out of control.
Could have.
And so I, as a young Black student, was walking out of our bookstore one day at the university at the beginning of my first semester senior year, carrying my bags with books that I spent money on like every other student, but I got stopped. And other students were walking by. And I'm just another student walking through like everybody else, but I drew the attention of the security guard. And so I think one of the distinctives then is that because there's this sense of suspicion, when something happens, the tension is there. It's resentful. And so, and I think a part of the challenge that we want to understand about the Black experience and the mentality of the Black experience, there are times when, as a Black person, you're feeling that tension and frustration because of some questioning or something like that, and the person's asking questions well-meaning. Sometimes they don't have any like kind of deleterious, agenda. They have a legitimate question. But here's the thing that we have to understand, my friend, is that because of that pattern of thinking that Black people experience, where they feel like there are times that they're being suspected and being observed, whether they are or not, the mere fact that that thought exists is a problem. And it's not a deficiency in Black character. And so the problem is that in our racialized society, we've helped shape a mindset that even Black people experience, that when they encounter authority, it's like, oh, not again. And so sometimes that can spiral out of control. And so it could be, for example, that a police officer stops someone and the person they stop is frustrated by the fact they were stopped. They say, why did you stop me? And whereas a white person won't even have that thought. Joe, I am 55 years old, and I can go into a Starbucks, not so much anymore, of course, but I've gone into Starbucks in the past, and often the way I feel treated by the 20-year-old person taking the order, there are times in which I wonder, would she do the same thing if I were a 55-year-old white man? And maybe she would. But the point is not just her. The point is that this is the environment that we have created. We've created this environment with explosive potential around race. Anything can strike a match and the thing goes up. Sometimes the whole thing with regards to NASCAR, I know the president's calling it a hoax and stuff like that, but we need to understand that a noose hanging from the little pull down on a garage has the power in our society to create a massive moment, whether it's legitimately there or not. And that's the problem. And we can't spin that away by saying it's all in your mind. And why is it in my mind? Why is it there? Why does this conversation continue to happen? And we've got to think redemptively. Our charge is to figure out, how do we exorcise this demon? And we need the Lord's help in doing that in a sincere brokenness and humility and yearning for it. And we're not going to make it go away by simply pretending that it goes away or saying it should go away. We've got real prayer and work to do together. Some of it is conversation and some of it is other things. Policing needs to be rethought. And so I hate the term defund the police. Is very unhelpful. What an unhelpful phrase. But we need to rethink how we as citizens want the police to interact with. I don't want to interact with the police every time I see them and think, is this a threatening moment? Is that how you're serving me right now?
Yeah.
I'm a citizen. I mean, think about Paul when he appealed to his Roman citizenship. And when they realized he was a citizen, it's like, oh, wait a second, we got to treat this guy a little differently here. Mm-hmm. That's how we should be treated. Every time a police officer encounters a citizen, a member of our society, there's got to be a level of respect, unless that person does something to cause that respect to be lost. Then the police need to kind of approach it differently. I think with I forget the brother's name who was just recently killed in Atlanta. It'll come to me in a moment.
Brooks, is that?
Yes, Rashard Brooks.
Yeah.
That whole thing could have gone completely differently if there was a different conception of policing. And so, and I think I've had conversations with police officers since then, is that it's hard for them to realize that they feel like when they did nothing wrong, they saw this, there's evidence of that. Now hold the time out. Let's talk about how can we change the whole dynamic. Let's make sure this guy's not going to be a threat on the street. Let's make sure he's not going to drive that car home. Easy to do that. Impound the vehicle. B, make sure this guy gets home safely. Let's value the significance of an arrest. As I was talking with the officer, I don't mean to belabor this point, but as I was talking with the police officer about this whole issue, we were kind of going back and forth about it. It's friend of mine. I gave him examples of people that I've, as a pastor, that I've gotten called into situations when they've been arrested. 4 cases come to mind, 4 instances where I was either a part of bailing them out or going there to meet them. They're coming out of Orient Road or whatever. In all 4 of those cases, Joe, all 4 of them, the arrest shouldn't have happened. I went to help a young lady who was a college graduate, young black woman, who fell asleep in her car while she was waiting for a friend to go upstairs into her apartment to grab her things. It took her friend about 30 minutes. Her friend came back out. This young lady was gone because the police had been called because she was in her car with this asleep, waiting for her friend to come down. The security guard saw her, called the cops. The cop knocked on the door, didn't ask any questions about what was going on. You're trespassing, you shouldn't be here. And she was like, well, I'm just waiting for my friend. She's crying, she's begging. She was arrested. And I remember, because we got involved as a ministry and stuff like that to get her out. I remember looking at her mugshot. I was like, this poor Christ-following young woman was broken in this moment. How could it even happen? And I don't know. I can surmise, well, if she was a young white blonde, maybe it wouldn't have happened. I can only surmise that. And that's the kind of question that black people often ask. Well, if she had been white, it never would have happened. Well, white people get arrested too. But so it's not like there's no white people in jails. But I was like, could not the
question, was it because of my whiteness that this happened?
Or that could be a factor.
Not there.
Yeah, exactly. And so just because if you are a young white lady and you say, hey, listen, my friend's upstairs, I may perceive something here. Whereas this young lady, who the officer said, yeah, I'm sure you probably got drugs in the car. And this young lady loves Jesus. And she was like, what's going on? And so I think there's a need to rethink all of those things need to be reconsidered.
And this is, again, I can just add this to a list of stories I've heard from just different black friends. I have my own experience one time. It's a humorous one where a friend of mine, Dre, and I were leaving the church at the same time. It was like 10 o'clock at night. We're on just kind of a highway road, but there's a gas station next to me, and we're both blaring music at each other. He's blaring his hip hop. I'm blaring my rock music. It was Creed, I remember. And we're both blaring it and kind of like, rocking out to it. And there was a police officer there at the gas station. My car was closer. He walked past my car to his car, slams his hand on the hood, and screams at him to turn that music down. And then turns and looks at me, nods at me, and keeps walking. Doesn't say a word to me, doesn't hit my car. We were both doing the exact same thing. Again, just I'm 20 years old, 22 years old. And I was like, oh, weird. I've heard stories like this. And again, I'm sure if we sat and talked, and I think every African-American I ever talked to, they have a story like that. They have a story this similar to that. So let me get back to the church question. How do you, as a pastor, take a community that, if they all have their own story, or at least someone real close to them story of a bad interaction with a police officer? Again, bad interaction with all police officers, but a bad interaction with a police officer. How do two people sit next to each other in worship when one's an officer and one is a Black American that feels uncomfortable around the police? How do we worship together? How do we worship in the same room? How do we worship the same God together? How do we unite there?
Well, that's a great question, brother. And let me say this. I think the Lord wants us to get to the same place on these issues. I don't think the Lord wants us to just kind of agree to disagree. I think he wants us to kind of step into each other's roles. I was a part of a conversation once with a bunch of believers in our church, and some folks from outside of our church were part of the conversation too. And we had one young lady share about her fear for her husband when he goes out at night to go to the store and stuff like that. And then the wife of the police officer that was a part of the conversation said she feels the same thing when her husband goes out for work. Is he going to be safe? And is he going to be okay? We need to see the legitimacy of both of those. And I think when they first started talking, they were each kind of dismissing the others as not being the real problem. My thing is the real problem. Police officers are at risk, and they deal with some crazy, seedy characters out there. And we need to be concerned for them. We need to be prayerful for them. And likewise, for folks who are worried about their sons or husbands, we need to feel that too. And so we need to come together and feel the vulnerability that we each have and tell the stories. I think I've heard police officers tell stories about their encounters. We had this one officer in our church who I was talking with him one day after church. He was explaining about a fight that he got in with someone. That he fought for 15 minutes with this guy in a house, hand to hand, rolling down the stairs together. And I'm like, this dude's he's fighting for his life. And so we need to feel that it's a reality. And at the same time, it's a reality that if you cross the wrong officer at the wrong time, it could cost you your life. And so we need to each see each other's story and learn from each other and feel for the other. I think that will help us to see the same thing. And then that worship that you described will be even richer, because we'll know that my experience is valued by you. I value your experience and situation, and yet the Lord has brought us together into one family of Christ. I think that really fuels our worship. And but we gotta get to the place where we see it, where we see the same thing.
I got two more questions for you, and then we'll call this a day. I feel like we could sit and talk for 6 hours, and I hope maybe have another conversation once we're in school with everybody sitting in the in the chapel. One of the things, and we've talked about before, I'm very saddened, and I think we can see the history of it. I at least know how it came about in the denomination I belong to, the Southern Baptist Convention. I can see historically why there are predominantly white churches in the Southern Baptist Convention and predominantly Black churches in the Southern Baptist Convention, that we have very few truly multi-ethnic churches.
That's true.
What are the conversations? We'll start there. We can't solve all this, 150 years of issues in one conversation. But what would be the conversations that predominantly white churches should be having?
That's a great question. For white churches, I think, should start by understanding why we have this history of separate churches. They should understand that it was largely bigotry, we call it racism, largely bigotry and prejudice that brought that division into the church and into all the denominations. And so with most of them started at some level, it was Black and white together. And typically it was the mistreatment of Black people by the white believers or parishioners that led to the division. I think about the example of Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and the founding of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and frankly, even more recently, is the history of Pentecostalism, brother. Is the that movement that really got going strongly out in Los Angeles in the early 20th century. The whole Azusa Street experience was initially profoundly interracial and intercultural, black and white there together, preaching, teaching. There was men and women. There's this real egalitarian feel until bigotry took over. And so racism broke in there. And now, of course, we've got the Assemblies of God. We've got the Church of God in Christ as more kind of the Black Pentecostal thread. And there are a bunch of splinters out there. I would say to my white brothers and sisters, embrace that, understand that history. There's a great book, Joe. I'm not sure if we've talked about it before. Mississippi Praying by Carolyn DuPont looks at how the church in the 60s in particular pushed back against the civil rights movement in Mississippi. Baptist churches, Presbyterian churches, Methodist churches. I would encourage my white brothers and sisters, get familiar with that history. And my hope would be is that it would sadden and convict and cause people to lament what happened. And I think if we can lament that helps us to be able to go meaningfully forward.
Awesome. Last question then. Flip it around. What are the conversations that predominantly Black churches need to be having?
Now, that's a very, very important conversation to have. So let me start with this and why this is real challenging, I think, for Black Christians in Black churches. And obviously, most Black Christians are in Black churches. The Black church has been for Black Christians, indeed for Black people. It's been a kind of safe space. It's been home. It's been a place where people who could not lead in society could lead, and they can assert themselves. They can be fully men and women, and they can build great institutions, that things can flower despite what's being said about them historically in the broader society. They've been able to make this institution thrive and flourish. And so for Black people, that feels like a lot to give away. And not that the Black church per se needs to be lost, but I think there needs to be a multi-ethnic movement there. I want to see more Black churches pursue multi-ethnicity. And so we need to see, our charge is this is not an easy thing, is to realize there's something more glorious than all the glory that Christ has shown us in the Black church. There's a greater glory that he gets and that we get to experience if we can see him, the Lord, create a new redemptive multi-ethnicity where there's real deep and true reconciliation in this kind of one new man that Paul talks about in Ephesians 2. I think getting to that has a magnificence that far eclipses the magnificence of the gospel thriving in the Black church context. Now, I'll say one other quick thing to that I will say to my Black brothers and sisters. That does not mean joining white churches. That does not mean that you got to diversify white spaces in order to pursue that. And so what I want to see more Black and brown churches do is to have a burden for multi-ethnicity and have them from their places, from their space, from their experience to pursue diversity from there. And not shut it down and go join, like Idlewild or go join like Calvary. And those are great churches, but it's not necessary to shut this thing down. It's not like the way integration happened, like back in the 70s, right? After all that stuff was finally done, there's a lot of Black institutions shut down to go join white institutions. It doesn't have to be that. And so I would say that to them, that pursue this with all your heart, but don't be afraid of being compromised or assimilating, because it doesn't have to be that.
Pastor Daryl, I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you carving out a few hours in the busy day. Do you got any final words you want to say? I'll give you the last word. Say
so
goodbye
I,
to Chapel.
I'll say one thing, which is very encouraging to me. I mean, I appreciate you wanting to have this conversation, but let me say this: Trinity is onto something in that you guys have, Joe, you guys have a heavily diverse student body.
We reflect America. Our percentages look like America.
Exactly. And so in so many ways, I think you guys, your ability as an institution to step into that, embrace that, and work redemptively in that, in so many ways, puts you in a leadership position on this issue. Because most Christian schools are not where you are. They're not. They're very largely white. And as much as they talk about the issues, they're trying to figure out how to bring people of color into the student body. You guys have done that. And I know there are more things that you're trying to do. You guys are continuing to try to improve upon that in a variety of ways. But in some ways, the hardest part is the student body part. Trying to get so many kids to come to your school that reflect that diverse profile. Trinity has done that. And I think that really speaks to how the Lord is going to continue to use what you guys are doing to impact this for the church overall. Because those kids are going to come through Trinity and go out into various leadership positions in their churches and business, representing Christ out there in the marketplace, having experienced this kind of diversity at Trinity. That's very encouraging to me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. We will talk soon. I look forward to having you back in chapel here once we're back in person.
All right, brother. God bless. Be safe. Be wise.
God bless. Thank you so much.